Welcome back to Discover Top 5, where we dive deep into some of the most fascinating, thought-provoking, and sometimes unsettling topics from around the globe. If you're passionate about uncovering hidden truths, learning about the most incredible facts, or exploring the most jaw-dropping mysteries, then you're in the right place. Here at Discover Top 5, we bring you the stories that matter, the ones that get your mind racing and your curiosity to new heights. Whether it's about the most bizarre events in history, astonishing facts about the natural world, or insights into what's happening today, our countdowns are designed to both inform and inspire. If you're a fan of exploring the extremes, the unknown, and the unexpected, then you'll want to stick with us to the end of today's video. So, before we jump into today's fascinating topic, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss out on the content that will blow your mind and keep you coming back for more. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we have in store. Without further ado, let's get started on today's countdown. Are you ready to discover something new? Let's dive in.
Sri Lanka was once a paradise on Earth, known for its lush landscapes and booming tourism industry. In fact, it was one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. But just a few years ago, this beautiful country fell into an abyss of economic collapse. How did this happen? Years of reckless government spending, massive foreign debt, and widespread corruption built up a financial ticking time bomb. The Rajapaksa administration borrowed billions for infrastructure projects that drained the economy without offering real returns. At the same time, tax cuts wiped out vital government revenue, and foreign reserves were depleted. Then, in 2022, the disaster hit. Inflation soared to over 50%, fuel and food shortages became the norm, and Sri Lanka defaulted on its national debt for the first time in history. The protests that followed were explosive. People flooded the streets, storming government buildings and forcing President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to flee the country. Banks ran dry. The tourism industry, which once contributed 12% of the economy, collapsed, and the middle class was left to struggle for survival. Sri Lanka's situation isn't just about economic mismanagement, it's a geopolitical powder keg. With China and India both vying for influence, Sri Lanka's future hangs in the balance. Will the country rebuild, or will this collapse spiral into something even worse? How long can Pakistan survive when everything seems to be in freefall? The economy is crumbling, inflation is through the roof, and political instability is pushing the nation to the brink. In 2023, inflation hit a staggering 30%, while the Pakistani rupee lost over 50% of its value in just 2 years. People are struggling to afford even the most basic necessities. Power outages and blackouts cripple industries, while the government's debt burden exceeds $130 billion. To stay afloat, Pakistan turned to the International Monetary Fund (IMF) for a bailout, but that hasn't solved the underlying issues. On top of economic turmoil, Pakistan faces intense political unrest. Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted in 2022, sparking nationwide protests. Since then, violent clashes between government forces and opposition groups have only intensified, while the military's grip on politics remains strong. Adding to the instability is the rise of militant groups, including the Taliban-inspired Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan (TTP), which has taken control of several regions. As inflation surges, poverty spreads, and national security deteriorates, Pakistan stands at a tipping point. Can it stabilize? Or is a full collapse inevitable? Myanmar's situation has gone from bad to worse in recent years. Since the military coup in 2021, the country has descended into a full-scale civil war. What started as protests against the military overthrowing a democratically elected government has turned into an all-out conflict. Resistance movements, fueled by the brutal crackdown from the military, have grown stronger, and now nearly half the country is embroiled in violent clashes. The economy, once promising, has been decimated. Foreign investors have fled, inflation is skyrocketing, and the national currency, the kyat, has lost nearly half of its value. Meanwhile, the military continues to print money, further worsening the inflation crisis. Myanmar is now a country in the middle of multiple wars. Ethnic armed groups have reignited long-standing conflicts with the military, and a new generation of fighters, the People's Defense Forces (PDF), have emerged, directly challenging the junta. China and India are both watching closely, with Beijing backing the military to protect its economic interests. While India has concerns over border instability, the real question is, can Myanmar recover? Or is this war turning it into a failed state? Afghanistan's fall in 2021 shocked the world, but what followed has been even worse. Under Taliban rule, Afghanistan has plunged into one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century. The country's economy is in tatters, with foreign aid once comprising 75% of Afghanistan's budget vanishing overnight. The Taliban's grip on power has come with severe consequences, as they've driven away vital international assistance. Since the Taliban took control, the country has seen unemployment soar, inflation make basic goods unaffordable, and food insecurity reach alarming levels. Over 23 million Afghans, more than half the population, are facing acute food insecurity, and the country is on the brink of famine. Internal divisions within the Taliban, rising terrorism from rival groups like ISIS-K, and the total collapse of healthcare, education, and basic infrastructure have turned Afghanistan into a nation in despair. How long can Afghanistan survive under the Taliban's rule? Will internal resistance and economic collapse lead to another breakdown? North Korea's situation is more fragile than most realize. For decades, the regime has maintained control through brutal tactics and a closed-off, isolated society. But now, the country's economy is in shambles. Its people are starving, and internal unrest is beginning to grow. North Korea's economy is completely dependent on international trade, but sanctions have cut the country off from vital resources like food, medicine, and fuel. Reports of severe food shortages are widespread, and the government has been forced to impose extreme rationing. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un continues to prioritize missile tests over addressing his people's needs. The biggest threat to the regime, however, is not just hunger, it's the growing dissatisfaction among the people. With corruption rampant within the elite class and growing resentment from the military and government officials, the illusion of control is starting to crack. How long can the regime hold on, or will internal dissent bring about its downfall? Lebanon's once prosperous economy has crumbled, leaving the country in a state of total meltdown. The Lebanese pound has lost over 98% of its value since 2019, pushing millions into poverty. Salaries that once allowed citizens to live comfortably are now virtually worthless. Inflation is out of control, making even basic necessities unaffordable. The banking system has collapsed, and government corruption is at an all-time high. Meanwhile, the country's political leaders continue to bicker over power, offering no solutions to the crisis. The 2020 Beirut port explosion, one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history, highlighted just how dysfunctional the system had become. Yet no one has been held accountable. Foreign aid and remittances, which once served as Lebanon's lifeline, have dwindled, and the country is running out of options. People are leaving in droves, seeking a better life elsewhere. Is this the beginning of Lebanon's total collapse? Laos is quietly slipping into one of the worst economic crises in Southeast Asia. While the world focuses on larger economies, Laos is facing a financial disaster. The government's debt has spiraled to nearly $15 billion, with more than 50% of it owed to China, largely due to massive infrastructure projects under China's Belt and Road Initiative. Inflation is another problem. The Lao kip has lost over 50% of its value, making imports more expensive and pushing prices for food, fuel, and basic necessities through the roof. The country is struggling to make its loan payments, and foreign reserves are nearly depleted. Energy exports, once a major source of revenue, are also facing trouble, with the country's investment in hydroelectric power proving inconsistent. With the government struggling to stabilize the economy, Laos faces a tough decision: either default on its debt or rely heavily on China for intervention. Either way, the people are feeling the pressure. Yemen has been caught in the crossfire of civil war, famine, and political instability for years. The war between the Iran-backed Houthi rebels and the Saudi-led coalition has devastated the country, leaving millions displaced and the economy shattered. Over 377,000 people have died, and the conflict shows no signs of ending soon. The Yemeni rial has lost more than 600% of its value, and over 17 million people are facing food insecurity. Hospitals lack basic resources, and healthcare is virtually non-existent. Despite international aid efforts, the country remains in a state of permanent devastation, with no clear end to the fighting in sight. Without a lasting peace agreement, Yemen is on the brink of total collapse. The country is facing starvation, disease, and a never-ending conflict. Can Yemen survive, or is it too late to save it? Kazakhstan's stability is increasingly being tested. A major oil and gas producer, the country has built its economy on its energy exports. However, its growing dependence on Russia and China for trade and political support has left it vulnerable to external pressures. In 2022, protests erupted over rising fuel prices, escalating into the worst unrest the country has seen in decades. Corruption remains a significant problem, with the elite controlling much of the country's wealth while ordinary citizens struggle to make ends meet. Inflation is surging, and the government's promises of reforms have done little to quell public dissatisfaction. Kazakhstan is facing a crossroads, With a fragile political system, economic instability, and mounting unrest, will the country weather the storm, or is another wave of instability on the horizon? Once seen as a success story in South Asia, Bangladesh is now teetering on the edge of an economic crisis. Rising fuel prices, inflation, and energy shortages are taking a heavy toll on the economy. The taka, the country's currency, has lost significant value, making imports expensive and pushing Bangladesh closer to an economic collapse. Climate change has exacerbated the situation, with floods and cyclones displacing millions. Bangladesh's reliance on textile exports has also made it vulnerable, as the industry faces significant struggles. The government is seeking loans from the IMF to stay afloat, but public frustration is growing. Without major reforms, Bangladesh could be facing severe instability in the coming years.
And that wraps up today's deep dive into some of the most captivating and thought-provoking topics. We hope you enjoyed this countdown and gained some fresh insights into the world around us. From jaw-dropping facts to hidden truths, it's always amazing to see just how much there is to discover. But before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Which country or topic did you find most fascinating? Do you agree with our list? Or do you have other nations you think should be on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. And your opinions are a big part of what makes our community so incredible. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a like. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Discover Top 5 for more eye-opening content. We're always bringing you the most interesting, insightful, and sometimes shocking lists that you won't want to miss. Hit the notification bell too, so you'll be the first to know when we drop our next video. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Also, if you have any suggestions or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to let us know. We're always excited to explore new ideas and bring them to life in our videos. Thanks for watching. And remember, the world is full of surprises, so keep exploring, keep discovering, and we'll see you next time right here on Discover Top 5. Until then, stay curious,